She answered the wrong number, and an irresistible billionaire started calling her every night. The rain in Riverton did not wash the city clean. Instead, it seemed to press the grime deeper into the pavement, creating a slick, gray sheen that reflected the neon signs of pawn shops and 24-hour diners. Maya Lewis sat in the driver's seat of her hatchback, the engine idling with a rough shudder that vibrated through the steering wheel and into her aching palms, the clock on the dashboard glowing a faint, sickly green read 11:45 at night. She was 28 years old, though tonight she felt at least 50. Her eyes burned from the dry, recycled air of the medical clinic where she had spent 8 hours answering phones and filing insurance claims, followed immediately by a 6-hour shift delivering groceries to people who did not want to leave their dry, warm homes. Maya rubbed her temples, staring at the raindrops racing down the windshield. Another day survived. That was how she measured time now. Not in weeks or months or milestones, but in shifts completed and bills paid. The passenger seat was piled high with empty thermal bags and a stack of overdue notices she had retrieved from her mailbox that morning. The largest one was from Riverton General Hospital. Her mother's cardiac treatments were necessary, non-negotiable, and terrifyingly expensive. She put the car in gear and began the slow drive to her apartment complex on the south side of the city. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds until she could finally close her eyes. Maya felt invisible. She moved through this bustling, modern American world like a ghost, handing people their clipboards, dropping paper bags on their porches, existing only to facilitate the lives of others, while her own life slowly eroded under the weight of responsibility. Her apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up. By the time she unlocked the door, her legs felt like lead. The air inside was stale and cold to save on heating costs. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door and kicked off her damp sneakers, wincing as her arches throbbed. She moved through the routine on autopilot, a glass of tap water, a quick wash of her face to remove the day's grease. She pulled on a pair of oversized sweatpants and a worn cotton t-shirt that had seen better days. She collapsed onto her narrow bed, the mattress sagging in the middle, and pulled the thin quilt up to her chin, just as her breathing began to even out. A harsh buzzing sound cut through the silence. Maya jolted, her heart hammering against her ribs. She scrambled for her phone on the nightstand. It was a cheap model with a spiderweb crack across the screen, the backlight flickering as it vibrated against the wood. Unknown number. Fear, sharp and cold, pierced through her exhaustion. It was past midnight. Nobody called this late with good news. Her mind immediately went to her mother. Had there been an emergency? Was the hospital calling from a different extension? She swiped the screen with a trembling thumb and pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello?" she said, her voice rough with sleep and panic. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause on the other end. For a second, she heard only the faint static of the line and the sound of a deep, steady breath. "Is this the concierge?" a man asked. The voice stopped Maya cold. It was deep, resonant and calm, wrapping around the syllables with a strange, magnetic weight. It did not sound like a doctor, and it certainly did not sound like anyone who lived in her neighborhood. It sounded like expensive scotch and heavy velvet curtains. Maya blinked, the adrenaline fading into confusion. "Concierge?" she repeated, realizing how ridiculous that sounded in her tiny, drafty bedroom. "You have the wrong number. This is a personal cell phone." There was a silence, longer this time, followed by a soft intake of breath. "Oh, I apologize. I must have misdialed the extension. It is late. My eyes are playing tricks on me. When you should have hung up. That was the social contract of a wrong number. You apologize. You disconnect. You vanish back into the void." But he didn't. The line remained open, a live wire connecting two strangers in the dark. "You sound exhausted," the man said. The comment was unexpected, observing her state with a frankness that felt intrusive yet oddly attentive. Maya looked at the ceiling, where a water stain shaped like a map of Florida stared back at her. She was too tired to be polite. She was too tired to put on her receptionist voice, the one that was bright and helpful and fake. "I am exhausted," she said, her voice raspy and dry. "And you are the one calling strangers at midnight looking for a concierge. Unless you need someone to deliver you a quart of milk or schedule a dental cleaning, you are out of luck." A low sound rumbled through the speaker. It took Maya a moment to realize he was chuckling. It was a warm, rusty sound, as if he did not use it often. "No milk," he said, the amusement lingering in his tone. "And my teeth are fine. I was actually looking for a bottle of sparkling water, but I suspect you do not have room service there either." "I barely have tap water service," Maya shot back, surprising herself with the banter. "Go to sleep, whoever you are." "Ethan," he said. "What? My name?" "It is Ethan." Maya hesitated. She should hang up. She had work in 6 hours. But the sound of another human voice, one that wasn't demanding payment or labor, kept her finger hovering over the end call button. "Well, Ethan," Maya said, clutching the phone tighter. "You are bad at dialing. Good night." She tapped the screen and the line went dead. The silence of the apartment rushed back in, but it felt different now, less oppressive. She lay back against the pillow, staring at the dark screen of her phone. She replayed the short conversation in her mind, the depth of his voice, the way he had laughed at her sharpness instead of getting offended. For the first time in weeks, the knot of anxiety in her chest loosened just a fraction. It was strangely intimate, that brief collision of worlds. He had no expectations of her. He did not know she was poor. He did not know she was drowning in debt. To him, she was just a voice in the dark, sharp and real. Maya fell asleep with the ghost of a smile on her lips. The next night, the phone rang at 12:15. Maya was sitting on the edge of her bed, rubbing lotion into her dry hands. When she saw the screen light up with the same unknown number, her pulse did a traitorous little skip. She stared at it for 3 rings, debating. It could be a mistake. It could be a harasser. But she remembered the laugh. She answered, keeping her voice guarded. "Did you lose the number for the room service again?" she asked. There was a pause, and then the deep voice returned, sounding slightly sheepish. "I might have," Ethan said, "or I might have misdialed on purpose." Maya frowned, clutching the tube of lotion. "On purpose? That is creepy. Ethan, I'm going to hang up." "Wait," he said, the word coming out quick, stripping away the smooth confidence she had heard the night before. "Please, do not hang up." Something in his tone made her pause. It was a crack in the armor. Beneath the rich timbre of his voice, there was a vast, echoing loneliness that she recognized instantly. It was the same loneliness she felt when she ate dinner standing up over the sink, or when she drove through the rain with only the radio for company. "Why?" she asked softly. Ethan cleared his throat. "I have not spoken to anyone all day who did not want something from me. You were the only person who just talked to me. I wanted to hear your voice again. It has a scratch to it. It is real." Maya looked down at her worn socks. She understood that feeling better than she wanted to admit. "I have 10 minutes, she whispered, shifting back on the mattress to lean against the wall. "Then I have to sleep." 10 minutes is perfect," he replied, and she could hear the relief in his breath. That was how it started. It became a ritual. Every night, somewhere between midnight and 1 in the morning, her cracked phone would light up. Maya stopped dreading the silence of her apartment because she knew it would not last. They established a rhythm. She would sit on the edge of her bed, the little bedside lamp casting a warm, yellow glow over her tired features. She would twist the corner of her sheet between her fingers as his low voice filled the room, transforming the cramped space into something larger, something shared. He asked her about her day, but he did not ask in the polite, dismissive way people usually did. He wanted details. "Tell me about the rude customer," he would say. "The one with the coupon. He was awful," Maya said one Tuesday, her voice animated as she paced the small length of her bedroom. "He insisted the coupon was valid even though it expired in 1999. He yelled at me until my manager had to come over. I wanted to scream. I bet you did," Ethan said. His voice was soothing, a balm over her frayed nerves. People forget that there is a human being on the other side of the counter. It makes me angry for you. What did you do?" I smiled. Maya sighed. Dropping back onto the bed, I smiled and told him to have a wonderful day. "Because I need the job. You have more restraint than I do," Ethan murmured. I would have thrown the coupon in the trash and escorted him out. Maya laughed, a soft, genuine sound. It must be nice to have that kind of power. "Ethan, to just throw things out when they annoy you, it is lonely," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You have no idea how lonely power can be. They never exchanged last names. They never spoke about where exactly they lived, though Maya knew he was in a city, likely Riverton or nearby, based on the weather he described. She kept her life vague, ashamed of her poverty, but she poured her emotions out to him. She told him about her mother's illness, though she downplayed the financial ruin it was causing. She told him about her dreams of one day owning a small bakery, of smelling yeast and sugar instead of disinfectant and exhaust fumes. Ethan listened. He was an incredible listener. Maya could almost picture him on the other end. She imagined him sitting in a comfortable leather chair, maybe in a study lined with books, leaning back with his hand rubbing his jaw, smiling as she described the absurdity of her world. In return, he gave her fragments of himself. He told her he worked in finance, that he spent his days looking at numbers that represented people's livelihoods, deciding which ones to keep and which ones to cut. He spoke of the pressure, the constant weight of expectation, the feeling that everyone around him was wearing a mask. "I feel like I'm acting a part," he confessed one night, his voice weary. "Everyone sees the suit, the title. No one sees the man, except you. You do not even know what I look like, and you see me better than people I have known for 10 years. Because you are just Ethan to me," Maya said gently. "Just a guy who can't dial a phone properly." He laughed then, and the sound made Maya's toes curl in her socks. Her shoulders, usually hunched with tension, would finally unclench during these calls. For an hour each night, she was not a receptionist or a delivery driver or a debtor. She was just Maya. Then came the night the air changed. It had been 2 weeks of nightly calls. Maya was lying on her stomach, her chin resting on her folded arms, the phone pressed to her ear. The rain was lashing against the window again, but she felt warm. They had been talking about travel, about places they would go if they could just leave everything behind. "I would go to the coast," Maya said dreamily, "somewhere wild, not a resort, just rocks and ocean and wind. I want to stand there and scream and have the noise just get swallowed up by the waves." Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher, vibrating with an intensity that made the hair on Maya's arm stand up. "You have a beautiful way of seeing the world, Maya." Maya's breath hitched. "That is not true. I am cynical and tired." "No," he insisted. "You find beauty in the grit. You are honest, and your laugh. God, your laugh is dangerous." "Dangerous?" she whispered, her heart beginning to race. "Yes," Ethan said. "It makes me want to do reckless things. It makes me want to find you." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with a sudden, electric awareness. It was no longer just two lonely people venting. It was a man and a woman, stripped of their defenses by the late hour and the anonymity of the line. Maya lay perfectly still, listening to the sound of his breathing. It was steady, deep, and close. It felt as if he were right there in the room, lying beside her. She could imagine the warmth of his body, the scent of him. Her face grew hot, a flush spreading down her neck. She felt a pull in her chest, a physical ache to reach through the phone and touch him. It was terrifying. "Ethan?" she breathed, her voice barely audible. "I am here," he replied, his voice a caress. "I am right here." They stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing, just existing in the shared intimacy of the connection. The tension was palpable, a tightrope walk between safety and something much deeper. "I should go," Maya whispered finally, though it was the last thing she wanted to do. "I know," Ethan said. "Sleep well, Maya. Dream of the ocean. Good night, Ethan." She hung up, her hand trembling. She rolled onto her back, staring wide-eyed at the dark ceiling. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt alive, terrified, and incredibly, painfully seen. Miles away, in the heart of downtown Riverton, Ethan Cole lowered his phone. He did not place it on a nightstand. He placed it on a polished mahogany desk that cost more than Maya made in a year. He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of his penthouse. The city sprawled out beneath him, a grid of golden lights shivering in the rain. From this height, the people down there were invisible, just ants moving through the concrete maze. Ethan caught his reflection in the glass. He was 32, tall, with broad shoulders and the sharp, predatory features of a man who built empires. He was the CEO of Colton Capital. He moved billions of dollars with a single signature. He appeared on the covers of business magazines and was chased by paparazzi whenever he stepped out of his car. He had everything. Penthouse apartments in 3 cities, a fleet of cars, a staff that catered to his every whim, and yet, standing there in the silence of his glass tower, looking down at the world he dominated, he realized he had never felt more alive than he did in the last hour, talking to a tired delivery girl on a cheap, crackling phone connection. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass, his gray eyes focused on the distant lights of the south side. "Good night, Maya," he whispered to the empty room. He knew he should stop. He knew that dragging a woman like her into his world would be complicated, perhaps even cruel. His life was a shark tank of media scrutiny, corporate espionage, and superficial alliances. But as he looked at the city, he knew he wouldn't stop. He couldn't. She was the only thing that felt real, and for a man who could buy anything on earth, reality was the one luxury he could not afford to lose. The nights in Riverton began to blur together, losing their sharp, lonely edges and softening into a waiting game. The hours between her shifts and sleep were no longer empty voids to be endured. They were the highlight of Maya's existence. The phone, cracked and outdated, became the most valuable object in her apartment. As days turned into weeks, the conversations between Maya and Ethan shifted from casual banter to something deeper, like roots taking hold in soil that had been dry for too long. They stopped pretending these were random chats. They were appointments. They began to trade small, jagged pieces of their lives, the kind of details one usually kept hidden until much later in a relationship. "I cannot sleep unless the room is absolutely freezing," Ethan admitted one Tuesday night. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated against Maya's ear. "I keep the thermostat at 65 degrees, pitch black, if there is even a sliver of light from the street. I am awake all night." Maya lay on her side, tracing the pattern of the peeling paint on her wall. "That sounds like a tomb," she said softly. "It is peaceful," he countered. "What about you? How do you sleep?" Maya hesitated. It was embarrassing to admit the truth to a man whose voice sounded like he commanded boardrooms and ordered expensive scotch. "I sleep with a pillow hugged to my chest," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "A big, lumpy body pillow. I have done it since I moved into this apartment alone. It makes me feel like someone is holding me, like I am not just floating in the dark by myself." There was a heavy silence on the line. She worried she had said too much, that she had sounded pathetic. "I wish I was that pillow," Ethan said. The words were spoken with such stark honesty that Maya's breath hitched in her throat. She gripped the phone tighter, her heart hammering a sudden, frantic rhythm against her ribs. Ethan carried that conversation with him into the daylight. His world was a fortress of steel and glass, a high-altitude kingdom of investments and acquisitions. He sat at the head of a mahogany table in the primary conference room of Colton Capital, surrounded by executives in Italian suits who were droning on about quarterly projections and market volatility. Usually, Ethan was the sharpest mind in the room. He was the predator who spotted the weakness in a deal before anyone else. But today, he was distracted. He stared at the tablet in front of him, but the numbers swam out of focus. Instead of profit margins, he heard the rasp in Maya's voice. He remembered the little catch in her breath when she laughed at his self-deprecating jokes. He remembered the way she had whispered his name. Ethan, just before they hung up the night before. It sounded different when she said it. It didn't sound like a request for money or a demand for his time. It sounded like a caress. Mr. Cole? Ethan blinked, snapping back to the sterile reality of the boardroom. The vice president of operations was looking at him expectantly. My apologies, Ethan said, his face smoothing instantly into a mask of indifference. Run those figures by me again. But under the table. His hand drifted to his pocket, fingers brushing the cool metal of his phone. He felt like an addict waiting for his next fix. He was a billionaire who could buy the building they were sitting in. Yet he was counting the minutes until he could sit in the dark and talk to a woman who delivered groceries for a living. That evening, the emotional stakes rose. Maya had a brutal day. Her mother's doctor had called with news about a medication shortage that would require a more expensive alternative. Then, her car had stalled at a red light, earning her a chorus of angry horns and a terrifying 10 minutes where she thought the engine had finally died for good. When Ethan called, she was standing in her tiny kitchenette, waiting for a pot of water to boil. The overhead light buzzed with a dying filament. "You sound heavy tonight," Ethan observed within seconds of her answering. "I am just tired," Maya said, leaning her forehead against the cool laminate of the cupboard. "I am tired of doing everything alone. Ethan, I am standing here cooking cheap pasta because I cannot afford takeout, and my back hurts, and I wish someone was here." "What would you want them to do?" Ethan asked. His voice was soft, devoid of the judgment she feared. "I do not know," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "I wish someone would just come up behind me. I wish they would wrap their arms around my waist and rest their chin on my shoulder and tell me that I can stop, that I can just rest for a minute." Miles away, in his penthouse. Ethan sat in a leather armchair with a glass of whiskey in his hand. The liquid amber caught the light of the city skyline. At her words, his fingers clenched around the glass so hard his knuckles turned white. The image hit him with the force of a physical blow. He closed his eyes and he could see it. He could see her small kitchen. He could see himself stepping up behind her, smelling the scent of her shampoo, something simple, vanilla or lavender. He imagined pressing his chest against her back, absorbing her exhaustion into his own strength. He imagined resting his chin near her temple and breathing her in. The desire to comfort her was so overwhelming it was almost painful. "Let's meet," Ethan said. The words left his mouth before he could filter them. Maya went silent. The water on the stove began to bubble, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. "Meet?" she repeated, panic rising in her tone. "Yes," Ethan said, leaning forward in his chair. "I want to see you. Maya, I am tired of imagining you. I want to be the one standing in that kitchen." "No," Maya said quickly, pushing away from the counter. "No, Ethan, you do not get it. Whatever this is, it works because we are voices in the dark. If you see me, the magic goes away. Why would it go away? Because I am not impressive," Maya cried out, her insecurity flaring hot and bright. "I'm wearing sweatpants with a hole in the knee. My apartment is the size of your bathroom. I look tired all the time. I'm not some fantasy girl. Ethan, I'm just a struggling woman trying to keep her head above water. If we meet, you will see that, and you will be disappointed. And I cannot handle one more disappointment right now." Ethan set his whiskey glass down on the side table with a sharp click. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that felt so cold compared to the woman on the phone. He needed to bridge the gap. He needed to show her that he wasn't looking for a fantasy. "Maya, listen to me," he commanded, his voice dropping to that calm, magnetic register that always made her stop. "Go to your bedroom." "What?" "Just do it. Go to your bedroom and close the door." Maya hesitated, but her feet moved of their own accord. She walked into her small, dim bedroom and shut the door, cutting off the noise of the boiling water. "I am here," she whispered. "Lie down," Ethan said, "or sit. Just get comfortable." She sat on the edge of the bed, her hand gripping the phone. "Now," Ethan continued, his voice slow and deliberate, "I want you to close your eyes." We are going to have a practice date. Right now. A practice date, Maya asked, feeling a flush rise on her cheeks. Yes, I want you to imagine it. I am coming over. I have just parked my car downstairs. I am walking up the stairs. Maya closed her eyes. His voice was so descriptive, so grounded that the scene began to paint itself behind her eyelids. I am knocking on your door, Ethan said. 3 soft knocks. You are standing on the other side. You are nervous. You are smoothing your hands down the front of your shirt. You open the door. Maya leaned back against her headboard, her breathing becoming shallow. She could almost hear the phantom knocks. And there I am, Ethan murmured. I am not looking at your apartment. I am not looking at the hole in your sweatpants. I am looking at you. Maya swallowed hard. What do you see? I see a woman who is beautiful because she is real, Ethan said, his voice thickening with emotion. My eyes are traveling over you. I am looking at your hair, a little messy from the day. I am looking at your mouth. I am looking at your hands. I am making you feel seen. Maya. Not as a worker, not as a daughter, just as a woman. The way he spoke was a physical sensation. Maya felt exposed, stripped bare of her defenses. She leaned her head back, her eyes squeezed shut. You are staring too long, she whispered, playing along, her voice trembling. I cannot help it, Ethan replied. I have wanted to see you for weeks. I am stepping inside. I am closing the door behind me. The world is locked out. It is just us. The atmosphere on the line shifted. It became heavy, thick with a sudden, sharp tension that was no longer just about comfort. It was about desire. What are you wearing right now? Ethan asked. It wasn't a lewd question. It was a question asked by a man who was desperate to visualize the woman he was falling for. An oversized t-shirt, Maya admitted, her voice barely a breath. It is old and soft, and underneath, just me, she whispered. Ethan groaned softly, a low sound in his throat that sent a shiver straight down Maya's spine. I am picturing you, he said, his voice rougher now. I am picturing you shifting on that bed. I'm picturing your bare legs brushing against the sheets. I am picturing the way that shirt hangs off your shoulder. Maya's hand went to her stomach, her fingers splaying over the fabric of her shirt, her belly tensed, a warm, liquid heat pooling low in her abdomen. Ethan, she breathed, you are making me nervous. Good, he said. I want you nervous, because I am nervous too. I am standing in your room in my mind, and I want to cross the distance. I want to touch you to make sure you are real. I don't want you to stop, she murmured, the confession slipping out before she could catch it. They stayed in that charged, breathless space for a long time. The air in Maya's room felt electric, as if he really were standing there in the shadows, watching her with those intense eyes she had never seen, but knew by heart. By the time they hung up, hours later, the decision had been made. The fear was still there, but the hunger was stronger. We will meet, Maya had said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. But on my terms. Name them, Ethan had replied instantly. Public place. Coffee, short, no pressure. If I get scared, I leave. If it feels wrong, we walk away. And you do not get to judge me for my boots or my car. I would never, he promised. 2 days later, Maya stood on the sidewalk in downtown Riverton. The sky was a slate gray, threatening rain again. She was standing in front of the Roasted Bean, a small, independent cafe with fogged-up windows. She checked her reflection in the glass of the door for the 10th time. She looked ordinary. She had chosen her best blouse, a dark floral print she had found at a thrift store, and tucked it into her black work pants. Her boots were scuffed at the toes, masked slightly with black marker, but she knew they looked cheap. She clutched her handbag against her side, her knuckles white. She felt ridiculous. She felt terrified. She was about to meet the man who had whispered things to her in the dark that made her blush in the light of day. What if he took one look at her and realized he had made a mistake? What if the chemistry was only a trick of the telephone lines? She took a deep breath, trying to practice a small, casual smile. It felt brittle on her face. Then, the car arrived. It wasn't just a car. It was a sleek, black town car that glided to the curb with the silent grace of a shark. It looked completely out of place, parked next to the dented sedan in front of it. Maya froze. Her stomach dropped. She watched as the rear door opened, a polished black shoe hit the pavement, then a long leg clad in dark, expensive fabric. Ethan Cole stepped out. The world seemed to narrow down to a single point. He was tall, taller than she had imagined. He was wearing a long, tailored wool coat that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. The collar turned up slightly against the wind. His hair was dark, windswept, and there was a faint shadow of stubble on his jaw that made him look less like a corporate executive and more like something dangerous and vital. He adjusted his cuffs, and then he looked up. His eyes were gray, intense, piercing, storm cloud gray. He scanned the sidewalk, and the moment his gaze landed on her, he stopped. Maya stopped breathing. She saw the recognition hit him. She saw his eyes widen slightly, then soften. There was no disappointment in his face. There was only a sudden, intense focus. He ignored the driver who was waiting to close the door. He crossed the sidewalk with long, measured strides. His attention locked on her as if she were the only person on this street. Maya couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She could only watch him come closer. This voice from the dark made flesh and blood. "Maya," he said when he reached her. His voice was real. It wasn't filtered through a speaker. It was lower, richer, and it vibrated in the air between them. "Hi," she managed to squeak out. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Hi, Ethan?" He didn't smile, not a polite, social smile. He looked at her with a kind of hunger that made her knees weak. His eyes traveled over her face, taking in her tired eyes, her thrift store blouse, her nervous hands. It was exactly like the practice date, only 1,000 times more intense. "You are exactly as I pictured," he said quietly. They went inside. The cafe was warm and smelled of roasted beans and damp coats. They found a small table in the corner, away from the door. The air between them was thick, heavy with unspent chemistry. As they sat, the space under the table felt incredibly small. Ethan's legs were long, and his knees almost brushed hers. Every time he shifted, Maya felt the ghost of a touch, and it sent a jolt of electricity through her. He didn't sit back. He leaned in, his forearms resting on his thighs, bringing his face closer to hers. He watched her while she spoke. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't look at the other patrons. He watched her lips moving, his gaze dark and attentive. "You are nervous," he stated. His voice a low rumble over the clinking of ceramic cups. "I am terrified," Maya admitted, gripping her coffee cup with both hands. You are intense." "Ethan, I'm just looking at you," he said. "I have been waiting a long time to do this." "And you are not disappointed?" she asked, the insecurity bubbling up again. "I am just me." Ethan reached out. For a second, she thought he was going to take her hand. Instead, he just let his fingers rest on the table, inches from hers. "That is all I wanted," he said firmly. "Just you." The conversation flowed, haltingly at first, then with the same ease they had on the phone. But the physical reality of him changed everything. When he laughed, she could see the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. When he listened, she could see the pulse beating steadily in his throat. 30 minutes turned into an hour. Finally, Maya glanced at the clock on the wall. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. "I have a shift at the store." Ethan nodded, though she saw the flash of disappointment in his eyes. "I understand." He stood up when she did. He insisted on walking her out. When they reached the door, the wind had picked up, biting and cold. Maya wrapped her thin coat tighter around herself. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him, "for being real." Ethan didn't answer with words. He stepped closer, breaking the personal bubble she had tried to maintain. He reached out, and his hand settled gently on the small of her back. It was a simple gesture, polite even. But through the thin fabric of her blouse, his palm felt like a brand. The heat of his touch seared through her, sending a warm electrical trail shooting up her spine and settling in the base of her neck. She gasped softly, her eyes widening. Ethan looked down at her, his hand lingering, firm and possessive. "I will call you tonight," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. Maya nodded, unable to find her voice. She turned and walked away, feeling his gaze burning into her back with every step she took, the imprint of his hand still glowing on her skin long after she had turned the corner. Maya floated through the rest of her weekend in a haze of terrifying optimism. The memory of the coffee date did not fade. If anything, it grew sharper, more vibrant in the quiet spaces of her life. She found herself pausing in the middle of folding laundry or scrubbing the counter, her hand instinctively drifting to the small of her back where Ethan's hand had rested. It had been a simple touch, polite and guiding, yet her skin still felt the phantom weight of his palm. She remembered the way his fingers had splayed slightly, possessing the space, the heat of his skin radiating through her thin thrift store blouse. She remembered the way his eyes, storm gray and intense, had crinkled at the corners when he finally smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that made him look younger, less like a man carrying the weight of the world and more like the voice she had fallen for in the dark. That night, she clutched her phone to her chest like a teenager, grinning into her pillow. The darkness of her bedroom felt less oppressive. The silence felt less lonely. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of her bills and her mother's illness felt bearable, buoyed by the singular, electric hope that she had finally found someone who saw her. The crash came on Monday morning. Maya was on her break at the clinic, sipping lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup while the receptionist at the next desk, a gossip-loving woman named Brenda, scrolled frantically through her phone. "You have to see this," Brenda said, shoving her screen into Maya's line of sight. "Tell me this is not the most gorgeous man you have ever seen." Maya glanced over, expecting a celebrity or an actor. Her heart stopped. It did not just skip a beat. It slammed into a wall and ceased functioning. Staring back at her from the high-resolution screen was Ethan. He was wearing a tuxedo, standing on a red carpet with camera flashes exploding around him. He looked taller, colder, and infinitely more distant than the man who had sat across from her in the cafe. The headline above the photo read, "Billionaire CEO Ethan Cole donates $5 million to City Arts Fund at star-studded gala." Maya's stomach dropped as if she had missed a step on a tall staircase. She blinked, hoping the image would change, hoping it was a mistake, but the caption was clear. Ethan Cole, founder of Colton Capital. Ethan Cole. The name echoed in her mind, stripping away the warmth of the weekend. He had told her his name was Ethan. He had told her he worked in finance. He had said he ran a company. He had never, not once, used the word billionaire. He is dreamy, isn't he? Brenda sighed, pulling the phone back. They say he is ruthless, though a total shark, swallows companies whole and fires everyone. But with a face like that, who cares? Maya stood up. Her legs felt numb. "I need some air," she whispered. She locked herself in the employee bathroom and pulled out her own cracked phone. Her fingers shook so badly she had to type his name 3 times before she got it right. The search results flooded the screen. A digital avalanche of wealth and power that buried the man she thought she knew. Ethan Cole. Net worth estimated at $4 billion. The Wolf of Riverton. How Colton Capital crushed the competition. Ethan Cole. Spotted with model Elena Vane, the reclusive king of Wall Street. Maya sat on the closed toilet lid, her chest tightening until she could barely breathe. She read about his penthouse, his private jets, his reputation for cold, calculated business moves. She read about the women he had been linked to, heiresses, actresses, models, women who did not buy their clothes at thrift stores, women who did not smell like sanitizer and grocery bags. A wave of humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She thought of her confession about the pillow. She thought of how she'd complained about a $50 medical bill while he likely had $50 bills falling out of his pockets. He must have been laughing, she thought, a bitter bile rising in her throat. She was an amusement, a novelty, a gritty little reality show he could tune into for an hour a night to feel better about his ivory tower. The anger came next, burning through the shame. He had lied. He had lied by omission, which was the worst kind of lie because it allowed him to pretend he was honest. When her phone rang that night at the usual time, Maya stared at it. The name Ethan flashed on the screen. Innocent and inviting. She answered, but she did not say hello. "So, how was the gala?" she asked, her voice ice cold. There was a pause on the other end. A confused silence. "Maya?" Ethan's voice was warm, unsuspecting. "What gala? The one where you donated $5 million, she said, her voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady. "The one where you wore a tuxedo that probably costs more than my mother's life savings." The silence on the line stretched, heavy and suffocating. "You saw the news," Ethan said finally. His tone had lost its warmth. It was flat, resigned. "I saw the news," Maya snapped, pacing her small bedroom. "I saw the article calling you a billionaire. I saw the pictures of you with women who looked like they were made in a factory. I saw the truth. Mr. Cole, Maya, please, do not Maya please me." She cut him off, tears stinging her eyes. "You lied to me. Every single night, you lied. You let me sit here and tell you about my struggles, about my debt, about how hard it is just to survive, and you sat there on your pile of gold and said nothing. What was I to you? Just some charity project? A bored billionaire's nighttime entertainment? Did you like hearing how the poor people live? No." The word exploded from him, sharp and commanding. Ethan was pacing his penthouse, his bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. He ran a hand through his hair, gripping the strands in frustration. His chest heaved. "It was never entertainment," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want this. I didn't want you to look at me the way you are looking at me right now. I didn't want to be Mr. Cole, the billionaire, the checkbook, the target. I wanted to be Ethan. Just Ethan. Well, you are not just Ethan," Maya countered, her voice breaking. "You are a man who owns the city I am drowning in. And you let me believe we were the same. We are the same," he insisted, "in the dark. We are the same." "That is easy for you to say," she whispered. "You can turn on the lights whenever you want. I can't—" She moved to hang up. "Do not hang up," Ethan pleaded, his voice cracking with a desperation she had never heard before. "Maya, please, let me explain properly. Not over the phone. There is nothing to explain. Come to dinner," he said, "but tonight I will send a car. Come to my world. See it, see me. If you still think I am a liar after that, if you still think I was using you, I will never call you again. I swear it." Maya hesitated. Her pride told her to hang up, to block his number and retreat into her safe, small life. But her heart, the traitorous thing that had memorized the sound of his breathing, wavered. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to believe he was the monster the articles described. But she remembered his hand on her back. She remembered the loneliness in his voice that no amount of money could fake. "1 hour," she said, her voice low, "and I am not going to any place where I need a gown. I will take you somewhere quiet." He promised. "Just give me a chance." The car that picked her up was different this time. It was still black, still expensive, but the driver was older, kinder, and he opened the door with a gentle smile that eased some of her tension. Ethan took her to a restaurant she had only heard about in whispers. It was tucked away in a historic brownstone, with no sign out front, just a heavy oak door. Inside, it was dimly lit, smelling of truffle oil and beeswax candles. There were only 5 tables, spaced far apart for privacy. Maya felt painfully conspicuous. She was wearing her best dress, a simple navy blue wrap dress she had bought on clearance 2 years ago, but against the backdrop of velvet drapes and crystal glassware, she felt like a child playing dress-up. Ethan was waiting at a corner table. He stood immediately when she entered. He was not wearing a tuxedo tonight. He wore a dark button-down shirt with the top collar unbuttoned and the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. He looked tired. He looked anxious. "Maya," he said, pulling out her chair. She sat, keeping her back straight, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their shaking. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting across from her. "I am only here because I want to know why," she said, skipping the pleasantries. Why did you keep calling? You could have any woman in this city. You could have 10 of them. Why me?" Ethan looked at her, his gray eyes unwavering in the candlelight. "Because they know what I am," he said quietly. "When I walk into a room, people see a net worth. They see an opportunity. They see a stepping stone. You answered the phone and you yelled at me for dialing the wrong number. You made fun of me. You listened to me when I said I was lonely, and you didn't try to fix it or sell me something. You just listened." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not touching, respecting the wall she had put up. "I have spent my entire adult life building this empire, Maya, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be a person. You reminded me. That is not entertainment. That is salvation." Maya looked down at the table, her anger softening into a bruised confusion. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She looked at the expensive silverware, the waiter hovering silently in the shadows, the man who could buy this entire block, and she believed that he was just as lonely as she was. But believing him didn't erase the gap between them. It only made it more visible. "I feel like I am in a museum," she whispered, looking around. "I feel like if I touch anything, I will break it and owe you $1 million. Ethan let out a short, dry laugh. "Then let's get out of here," he said. He paid the bill without looking at it, a gesture that made Maya wince, and let her out. But instead of taking her home, he directed the driver to a glass skyscraper in the financial district. "Where are we going?" she asked as the elevator shot upward, making her ears pop. "My office," he said. "You read the articles. You read about the ruthless CEO. I want you to see where I actually live." The office occupied the entire top floor. It was a sprawling space of modern art, polished concrete, and glass. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly silent. The staff had gone home hours ago. Ethan walked through the space with practiced ease, flipping on lights that illuminated rows of empty desks and monitors. He led her to his personal office, a cavernous room with a desk the size of a dining table and a wall of windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. "This is it," he said, and gesturing to the room. "This is where I spend 18 hours a day." Maya walked to the center of the room, hugging her arms around herself. It was impressive. Yes, but it was also sterile. There were no personal photos, no knickknacks, no signs of life. "It is big," she said. "It is a cage," he corrected. He walked over to a set of glass doors and slid them open. The sound of the wind rushed in, carrying the distant hum of traffic. "Come here," he said. Maya followed him out onto the balcony. It was high, terrifyingly high. The wind whipped at her skirt and hair. Below them, Riverton was a carpet of diamonds, glittering and cold. She leaned against the railing, looking down. From up here, the grocery store where she delivered food was just a speck. Her apartment was invisible. Her problems felt microscopic, yet heavy as lead. "I don't belong here." "Ethan," she said, her voice snatched away by the wind. She turned to face him. "Look at this. Look at you. You are a king in a castle. I am just trying to keep the lights on." Ethan stepped closer. He didn't stay on his side of the balcony. He invaded her space, his presence warm and solid against the chill of the night. He placed one hand on the railing beside her, boxing her in, not to trap her, but to shield her. "You think this matters?" he asked, gesturing to the city lights. "You think any of this money changes the fact that I go home to an empty house? You think it changes the fact that when I hear your voice, my chest loosens for the first time all day?" He looked down at her, his expression fierce and open. "I have never felt more myself than I do when I am talking to you. Maya, I don't care about the gap. I don't care about the worlds. I care about how I feel when you are near me." Maya looked up at him. The moonlight softened the sharp angles of his face. He didn't look like a billionaire now. He looked like a man who was terrified of losing the one thing that made sense. A sudden gust of cool wind swept across the balcony, blowing a lock of Maya's dark hair across her face, blinding her for a second. Ethan moved. He reached out, his fingers gentle, and tucked the wayward strand behind her ear. His hand didn't pull away. His thumb brushed against her cheekbone, a feather-light touch that sent a shockwave through her entire body. The air between them changed, the argument, the money, the articles, they all evaporated, leaving only the heat of his skin against hers and the rapid thud of her heart. Their eyes locked. Ethan's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up to her eyes, asking a silent question. Maya's breath hitched, her lips parted slightly, a soft, involuntary invitation. Ethan leaned in. He moved slowly, giving her every second to push him away, to run, to say no. She didn't run. When his lips met hers, it wasn't like the movies. It was tentative at first, a soft, testing pressure. A question. Is this real? Maya let out a shaky sigh against his mouth, and the sound seemed to break his restraint. The kiss deepened. It became slow and lingering, a savoring of something they had both been starving for. Ethan's lips were warm and firm. He tasted of mint and the faint, oaky trace of the scotch he must have had earlier. Maya's hands, which had been clenched at her sides, unclenched. They moved of their own volition, sliding up his chest, curling into the crisp fabric of his shirt. She felt the hard muscle beneath, the heat of him seeping into her cold palms. Ethan groaned low in his throat, a vibration she felt against her own lips. His free hand, the one not cupping her face, moved to her waist. He settled it there, his fingers spreading wide, drawing her carefully closer until their bodies brushed. The sensation was overwhelming. The wind, the height, the man. It was too much. And yet it wasn't enough. Maya tilted her head back, opening to him, allowing the kiss to grow more intense, more urgent. She felt his heart hammering against her chest, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. For a moment, there was no debt. There was no deception. There was just this connection, this undeniable magnetic pull that had started with a wrong number and led them to the top of the world. And then, a sound shattered the moment. Footsteps, heavy and rhythmic, echoing from inside the office. "Mr. Cole, are you out there?" The voice of a security guard, loud and professional, cut through the night air. Ethan pulled back. He didn't jump away. He withdrew reluctantly, as if it physically pained him to break the contact. He rested his forehead lightly against hers for a second. His eyes squeezed shut. They were both breathing hard, their breath mingling in small white clouds in the cold air. Maya felt flushed, dazed. Her lips tingling and swollen, her body was still leaning into his, unable to regain its own center of gravity. "One moment," Ethan whispered, his voice rough and unsteady. He pulled away completely, turning toward the glass doors, shielding Maya with his body as he composed himself. The kiss was over, but the energy of it hung heavily in the cool night air. It was an unspoken promise, a terrifying precipice they had both just stepped off. Maya touched her fingers to her lips, watching his broad back as he walked toward the door, and knew with sinking certainty that there was no going back to the way things were. She had tasted the life she wasn't supposed to have, and she wanted more. The kiss on the balcony had changed the atmosphere of the city itself. Riverton, usually gray and imposing to Maya, now felt charged with a secret energy. The weeks that followed blurred the lines between her two lives, merging the exhausted delivery driver with the woman who held the attention of a billionaire. Their relationship shifted into something openly, dangerously romantic. They still held to their nightly ritual of phone calls, but the disembodied voices in the dark were no longer enough. Now, Ethan found ways to insert himself into her physical world. He would steal away from his glass tower for quick lunches at a deli near her clinic, sitting on a wobbly stool in a suit that cost more than the building, watching her eat a sandwich with a look of utter fascination. There were late-night drives, too. After her shift ended at the grocery store, his black car would be waiting in the shadows of the loading dock. Maya would slide into the passenger seat, the leather cool and smelling of cedar, and they would drive aimlessly through the quiet streets. It was during these drives that the intimacy deepened without words. Maya would watch the city blur by, the streetlights smearing into streaks of gold and orange against the rain-streaked glass. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, His other hand resting loosely on the gear shift, it became a point of electric contact. Occasionally, his fingers would brush against hers, a deliberate grazing of knuckles that sent a jolt straight to her chest. Sometimes, he would simply turn his hand over, palm up, and she would slip her hand into his, their fingers interlacing as the engine hummed a low lullaby. Maya felt a constant, vibrating mix of glowing happiness and sharp anxiety. She was floating, yes, but she was floating without a parachute. Then the gifts started arriving. They were not the diamond necklaces or designer handbags she had read about in the tabloids. They were observant gifts, small, practical things that proved he listened to every complaint she whispered in the dark. One Tuesday, a package arrived at her apartment containing high-end noise-canceling earbuds. The note simply said, "For the bus ride, so you can hear yourself think." 2 days later, she found a box waiting for her containing a sturdy, orthopedic pair of work shoes. They were not ugly, but they were clearly designed for someone who spent 12 hours a day on their feet. When she put them on, the relief in her aching arches was so profound she almost cried, but along with the gratitude came a prickly heat of defensiveness. Maya looked at the shoes and felt the walls of her independence trembling. She bristled at the feeling of being taken care of. She had spent 10 years surviving on her own grit, patching her own wounds, and paying her own way. Every gift felt like a loose brick in the foundation of her pride. She worried that if she leaned on him, even for shoes, she would forget how to stand on her own, and if he left, she would fall. The tension came to a head when he invited her to the gala. "It is for the Riverton General Hospital," Ethan had said, his voice casual over the phone. "The hospital that treats your mother. Colton Capital is the primary sponsor. I have to be there. I want you there with me." Maya had tried to refuse. She listed every excuse. She had nothing to wear. She would not know anyone. She would be tired. Ethan dismantled them all. He insisted on buying her a dress, framing it not as a gift but as a requirement for the event, like a uniform, on the night of the gala. Maya stood in front of the full-length mirror in her tiny bathroom. The dress was midnight blue, simple but devastatingly flattering. It skimmed her curves without clinging, the fabric moving like water. She wore no jewelry, just her hair pinned back loosely. For a moment, staring at her reflection, she felt beautiful. She felt like someone who belonged in Ethan's world. That feeling evaporated the moment she stepped into the ballroom. The room was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. It was packed with the elite of Riverton, men in tuxedos who smelled of money and cigars, and women in gowns that sparkled like diamond dust. The air hummed with polite laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. When Maya entered on Ethan's arm, the room did not go silent, but the temperature seemed to drop. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Maya felt the weight of their judgment like a physical pressure. She saw women leaning into their husbands, whispering behind manicured hands. She saw the way their gazes raked over her dress, searching for a label, and then up to her face, searching for a pedigree. Who is she? The whisper drifted from a nearby cluster of guests. It was not meant to be heard, or perhaps it was, "I have never seen her before," another voice murmured. "She looks terrified." Maya's cheeks burned, the heat spread down her neck, staining her skin. She gripped Ethan's arm tighter, her fingernails digging into his sleeve. Ethan was smiling at a donor, seemingly oblivious, comfortable in this shark tank because he was the biggest shark. "I need a moment," Maya whispered, pulling her arm away. Before he could stop her, she turned and walked quickly toward the side exit, her head down, dodging waiters and wealthy patrons. She found refuge in a quiet hallway near the kitchens. It was dimly lit, the floor carpeted in a dull beige. She leaned against the wall, taking shaky breaths, trying to force the stinging tears back into her eyes. She felt foolish. She felt like a child who had snuck into a party she wasn't invited to. Footsteps clicked rapidly on the floor tiles. Maya. Ethan appeared around the corner. His face was tight with worry. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. "What happened?" he asked. "You just vanished. I do not belong here." "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "look at me. I am a joke out there. They are staring at me like I am a stain on the carpet. They are staring because you are beautiful," Ethan said, reaching for her hand. "They are staring because they know," she snapped, pulling her hand back. "They know I am not one of them. You dragged me here. Ethan, you dressed me up in this expensive gown and paraded me around, but it does not change who I am. I am a receptionist. I deliver groceries. I am not a gala wife." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and bitter. Ethan's expression hardened. A flash of frustration crossed his gray eyes. "I did not drag you here to parade you," he said, his voice dropping to a low, rough growl. "I brought you here because I hate these events. I hate the fake smiles and the handshake deals. The night feels wrong without you. I wanted the one real thing in my life to be by my side. You wanted a shield," Maya countered. "You used me to make yourself feel better, without thinking about how it makes me feel." The tension between them crackled, edged with both frustration and a desperate, underlying desire. They were arguing, but they were standing too close. The air was thick with the scent of his cologne and her fear. "I am terrified." "Ethan," she confessed, the anger draining out of her to reveal the raw wound beneath, "I am terrified of losing myself. I am scared that if I get used to this, to the cars and the shoes and the protection, I will turn into someone else. I will be seen as a gold digger, a woman who traded her pride for a billionaire." Ethan stepped closer, crowding her against the wall. He did not touch her, but his body radiated heat. "You think you are the only one who is scared?" he asked, his voice rough. "I am terrified that you will walk away. Every time I see that look in your eyes, that look that says I am too much, my world is too heavy, I panic. I'm scared you will leave me alone again in a penthouse that suddenly feels too big to live in." Maya looked up at him, stunned by the raw honesty in his face. He wasn't the CEO right now. He was just the man who called her at midnight because he couldn't sleep. The emotion swelled, breaking the dam of their restraint. Ethan stepped in. He raised his hands and cupped her face, his palms warm and rough against her skin. His thumbs brushed away the angry tears she hadn't even realized had fallen, catching the moisture before it could ruin the facade she had tried so hard to maintain. Maya clutched his wrists, her fingers dug into his skin, torn between the instinct to pull back and the overwhelming need to lean in. She looked at his mouth, then his eyes. "To hell with them," Ethan whispered. Maya surged forward. She closed the gap, kissing him hard. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate and aching, a collision of fear and need. She poured all her insecurity and all her longing into it, and he met her with equal force, his hands tangling in her hair, anchoring her to him. "Let's go," he murmured against her lips. They left the gala early, ignoring the confused looks of the valets. They drove through the rainy night in silence. But it wasn't the comfortable silence of their usual drives. It was a heavy, charged silence. The air in the car was thick with unspoken intent. When they arrived at her apartment building, Ethan didn't just walk her to the door. He followed her up the 4 flights of stairs, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Inside her small apartment, the air was cold. Maya fumbled to lock the door while Ethan stood in the center of the narrow living room. The sound of distant traffic hissed on the wet pavement below. They stood facing each other, breathing unsteadily. Their clothes were slightly damp from the dash from the car to the building. Maya's hair was coming loose from its pins, strands sticking to her wet cheek. Ethan's gaze traced her face. He looked at her shoulders, rising and falling with her rapid breath. He looked at the way the blue dress clung to her damp skin. "You are shaking," he said softly. "So are you," she whispered. They moved toward each other, as if drawn by a magnet. The moment was sensually charged, the adrenaline of the argument transforming into something tender and overwhelming. Ethan's hands settled carefully at her waist. He didn't grab, he held, his thumbs rubbing slow circles through the fabric of the dress. He drew her in until their bodies brushed. Maya let out a shuddering breath. She slid her palms up his chest, feeling the solid wall of muscle beneath the fine wool of his suit jacket. She could feel the steady, heavy thump of his heart beneath his shirt. It was beating just as fast as hers. She moved her hands up to his neck, her fingers curling into the short, dark hair at his nape. The texture of it, the warmth of his skin, made her senses reel. She pulled him down, guiding his mouth to hers. This kiss was different. It was a slow, lingering exploration. It deepened with each breath, a silent conversation where apologies were made and accepted. Ethan pressed his forehead to hers between kisses. His eyes were closed, his lashes dark against his cheek. "Maya," he whispered, his voice raspy, "you can stop at any time. Say the word." Maya answered by stepping closer. She moved until their bodies aligned completely, her toes almost on top of his. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingers, down the strong column of his neck, and gripped his upper arm. "I don't want to stop," she murmured. She savored the warmth of him. They shared more kisses, hungry, searching, but always respectful. His movements were unhurried, full of a restrained longing that told her he was holding back a tidal wave of emotion for her sake. He treated her like she was precious, like she was something fragile that he wanted to protect, not just possess. They didn't make it to the bedroom. They didn't need to. The emotional exhaustion of the night demanded comfort more than passion. Later, they fell asleep tangled on her small, lumpy couch. They were fully clothed. Ethan had discarded his jacket and shoes, and Maya had kicked off her heels. She lay with her head on his chest, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. His arm was wrapped securely around her shoulders, holding her close against his side. For the first time in her life, the apartment didn't feel lonely. It felt full. It felt safe. Maya closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of rain and cedar, and let herself drift into a dreamless sleep. Morning arrived with a gray, unforgiving light that filtered through the thin curtains. Maya woke to the sound of a voice. She blinked, disoriented, realizing she was alone on the couch. A blanket had been tucked carefully around her. She sat up, rubbing her face, and looked toward the small kitchen area. Ethan was standing by the window, his back to her. He was on his phone. His posture was rigid, every line of his body tense. "I do not care what the tabloids are saying." Ethan snapped into the phone, his voice low but sharp as a knife. "Kill the story. Marcus, I pay you to handle this." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. Maya felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. "No," Ethan said, his hand gripping the back of his neck. "We are not issuing a statement. We are not spinning this. I am telling you to fix it. I need you to start managing this relationship in the press before they tear her apart. Managing this relationship." The phrase hit Maya like a physical blow. The safety of the night before shattered instantly. She wasn't a partner. She wasn't a girlfriend. She was a situation. A problem to be managed. A PR crisis. Ethan turned around then, ending the call. When he saw her sitting on the couch, her hair messy and her eyes wide with hurt, his face softened, but the shadow of the phone call lingered in his eyes. "Maya!" He started, but Maya couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears. The knot in her stomach pulled tight, twisting with the familiar, sickening dread that she had let herself believe in a fairy tale, only to wake up in a business negotiation. The morning sun that filtered through the thin curtains of Maya's apartment was gray and unforgiving, casting long, pale shadows across the worn floorboards. Maya stood frozen near the kitchenette, her bare feet cold against the linoleum. The warmth of the previous night, the safety she had felt sleeping in Ethan's arms on the lumpy couch, had evaporated into the stale air. She had woken up alone on the cushions, covered by a blanket, and had followed the low rumble of Ethan's voice to where he stood by the window. She had not meant to eavesdrop, but the smallness of the apartment made privacy impossible. Ethan was on the phone, his back to her, his posture rigid and tense. He was not speaking to her. He was speaking to a crisis manager. "I do not care what the optics are," Ethan snapped, his voice low but cutting. "Marcus, listen to me. If that story runs, it destroys her." Maya took a step closer, Her hand hovering over the back of the sofa, she heard the tinny, indistinct voice on the other end of the line, rapid and frantic. Then Ethan spoke again, and the words hit her like a physical blow. "We need a plan before this goes public," he said, running a hand aggressively through his hair. "If we do not get ahead of this, the media will paint her as a money-hungry nobody who trapped me. They will say she is looking for a payout. I need you to manage this. Fix it." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. A money-hungry nobody. A payout. She waited for him to shout that it was not true. She waited for him to tell the person on the other line that she was brilliant and hardworking and that he loved her. But he didn't. He just listened, nodding grimly at the strategy being laid out to contain the damage she caused simply by existing. She felt a wave of humiliation so hot it made her skin prickle. She wasn't a partner to him. She wasn't a girlfriend. She was a liability. She was a messy situation that required a strategy meeting at 7 in the morning. Ethan ended the call and turned around. When he saw her standing there, her eyes wide and glassy with hurt, his expression shifted instantly from corporate ruthlessness to panic. "Maya," he started, taking a step toward her. "How much of that did you hear?" "Enough," she whispered. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. It was the steadiness of something breaking. "I heard that I am a problem. I heard that I am a nobody who needs to be managed." Ethan closed the distance between them, reaching for her hands, but she stepped back, crossing her arms over her chest defensively. "You are misunderstanding," he said, his voice urgent. "I was talking to my PR team. There are rumors starting to circulate after the gala. I am trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Maya let out a sharp, incredulous laugh that had no humor in it. "You are not protecting me, Ethan. You are handling me. You are talking about me like I am a fluctuating stock price or a bad quarterly report. You are ashamed of me." "I'm not ashamed of you," Ethan shouted, the veneer of his calm cracking. "I am terrified for you. You do not understand this world. Maya, they will eat you alive. If we do not control the narrative, they will turn you into a caricature. I am trying to build a wall around you so you do not get hurt. I never asked for a wall," she shouted back, tears finally spilling over. I asked for the man who called me at midnight because he was lonely. But that man is gone, isn't he? Now I just have Mr. Cole, the billionaire who thinks everything can be fixed with a strategy and a checkbook." Ethan stopped, his jaw working as he tried to find the words. "Maya, please, I am doing this for us. There is no us if I am just a project to you," she said, her voice breaking. "I refuse to be your secret shame. Ethan, I refuse to be the PR crisis you have to solve before you can go to your board meetings. I am a person. I have a life. It might not be a rich life, but it is mine, and I am not going to let you or your team rewrite it to make you look better." She walked over to the small table by the door where she kept her keys. Sitting there was a delicate silver bracelet he had given her a week ago, a thin chain with a small, tasteful charm. It was the only expensive thing she owned. She picked it up. The metal felt cold in her hand. "Maya, do not," Ethan warned, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. She walked back to him and placed the bracelet on the table beside him. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. "Take it," she said. "I do not want your protection, and I do not want to be managed. Please leave." Ethan looked at the bracelet, then at her face. His gray eyes were clouded with pain, a raw, open wound of regret. He opened his mouth to argue, to plead, but he saw the resolve in her posture. He saw that pushing her now would only shatter whatever was left of her dignity. He picked up his jacket from the back of the couch. He didn't pick up the bracelet. "I never wanted to make you feel small," he said quietly. He walked to the door. When the latch clicked shut behind him, the sound echoed in the small apartment like a gunshot. Maya stood there for a long minute, staring at the closed door, before her legs gave out and she sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. The next few weeks were a blur of gray exhaustion. Maya went into survival mode. It was a place she knew well. She went to the phone store and changed her number, paying the fee with money she should have saved for groceries. She blocked Ethan's number on every platform, erasing the digital footprint of the man who had become her entire world. She couldn't stay in the apartment. The memory of him was everywhere, on the couch where they had slept, in the kitchen where she had imagined him hugging her, in the silence of the night where his voice used to fill the room. She packed up her things and her mother's few belongings and moved to a studio apartment in a rougher neighborhood, 10 blocks further from the city center. It was smaller, darker, and smelled faintly of mildew, but it was cheaper. She threw herself into work. She picked up every extra shift available at the clinic and the grocery service. She worked until her feet bled and her eyes burned, trying to exhaust herself so thoroughly that she wouldn't dream. But distance didn't dull the ache. It only made it sharper. Every time her phone lit up with a notification, her heart would lurch, a traitorous spark of hope flaring in her chest that it might be him. Before reality crashed back down, she missed him. She missed his laugh. She missed the way he listened. She missed the man who existed in the dark, even if she hated the man who existed in the light. Ethan was not faring any better. In the gleaming glass tower of Colton Capital, the employees walked on eggshells. The CEO had turned into a ghost. Ethan moved through the corridors with a terrifying silence, his face a mask of stone. He sat in board meetings, staring out the window at the city below, barely hearing the proposals being presented. When he did speak, his voice was sharp and biting. "This is garbage," he snapped at a senior analyst during a presentation on emerging markets. "Do it over, and do not waste my time with half-baked theories." The analyst scrambled to gather his papers, pale and shaking. Ethan didn't even watch him go. He just rubbed his temples, where a headache had been throbbing for 14 days straight. He stopped accepting social invitations, the charity galas, the dinners, the ribbon-cutting ceremonies. He declined them all. He went home to his penthouse, the vast empty space that Maya had rightly called a cage. Late at night, he would sit in his leather armchair, the room dark and cold just the way he used to like it. But now, the darkness felt suffocating. He would hold his phone, his thumb hovering over her old contact information. He knew the number was dead. He had tried it once, in a moment of weakness, and the automated operator voice telling him the line was disconnected had nearly broken him. He replayed their conversations in his head, desperate to keep the sound of her voice from fading. He remembered the rasp of her laugh. He remembered the way she had challenged him. He felt her absence like a phantom limb, a constant, dull pain that reminded him he had held something real in his hands and let it slip away because he tried to grip it too tightly. Then, the crisis hit. It was a Tuesday afternoon, raining as always in Riverton. Maya was at the clinic when she got the call from the nursing home where her mother stayed during the day. "Miss Lewis, it is your mother. She collapsed. The ambulance is taking her to Riverton General." The world tilted on its axis. Maya dropped the phone, ignoring the startled look of the patient she was checking in, and ran. The hours that followed were a nightmare of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. Maya sat in the hard plastic chair of the waiting room, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself to hold her shattering composure together. Her mother was stable, but the doctors were running tests, expensive tests. Specialists were being called in. Maya stared at the scuffed linoleum floor. She did not have the money for this. She was already drowning. This would pull her under. Her hand drifted to her pocket, clutching her phone. The urge to call Ethan was so strong it was physical. One call. That was all it would take. He would answer. She knew he would. He would send the best doctors. He would make the bills disappear. He would wrap his coat around her and tell her she wasn't alone. She pulled the phone out, her thumb hovering over the keypad, but she couldn't do it. If she called him now, she would be exactly what his PR team said she was, a desperate woman looking for a payout. She would be trading her dignity for his help. She would be proving that she needed his money more than she needed his respect. She swallowed the urge, bitter and sharp like poison, and put the phone away. She would figure it out. She always did. "Excuse me, Miss Lewis?" Maya looked up. A nurse was standing there, holding a clipboard. "Yes?" Maya said, her voice raspy. "Is she okay?" "She is resting," the nurse said gently. "The specialist just finished his assessment. He wants to keep her for a few days for observation and a new treatment protocol." Maya closed her eyes. "I need to see the billing department first. I do not think my insurance covers—" The nurse smiled, a confused but kind expression on her face. "Oh, you do not need to worry about that. The billing has been taken care of." Maya blinked. "What?" "A donation," the nurse explained. "We received a call about an hour ago authorizing full coverage for your mother's stay and any necessary procedures. An anonymous donor." Maya sat very still. The noise of the hospital faded into a dull buzz. "Who?" she whispered. The nurse checked the chart. "It just says it is a charitable grant. Someone must care about your mother a great deal." Maya nodded slowly, numbness spreading through her limbs. 2 weeks later, the paperwork arrived in the mail at her new address, forwarded from the hospital. It was a standard receipt of services rendered, marked paid in full. At the bottom, in small print, was the name of the funding source, the CC Foundation, Colton Capital. Maya sat on the floor of her empty apartment, holding the paper. She felt a complicated storm of emotions. Fury. First, he had intervened. He had used his money to fix her problem, exactly as she had told him not to. But then the fury softened into something more painful. He hadn't done it to buy her back. He hadn't called. He hadn't sent a car. He hadn't used the money as leverage to force her to talk to him. He had done it anonymously, from the shadows, ensuring her mother was safe without demanding a single ounce of credit or gratitude. He had respected her silence, but he hadn't abandoned her. The walls around her heart, the ones she had reinforced with anger and pride, began to develop hairline cracks. But the world outside was not as kind as Ethan. Marcus Hale, a former associate of Ethan's who had been pushed out of the inner circle during a restructuring, had been watching. He had seen the breakup. He had seen Ethan's distraction, and he saw an opportunity to wound the man he hated. The story hit the gossip blogs on a Friday evening. Billionaire's secret scandal, the blackmail plot. The article didn't use Maya's name, but it described her perfectly. It spun a narrative that was twisted and cruel. It claimed that a low-level hospital worker had seduced Ethan Cole and was now threatening to release damaging personal information unless he paid off her debts. It painted Ethan as the victim of a predatory con artist. Maya's phone began to ping. She hadn't realized how easily people could find her. Someone had leaked her social media handle in the comments. The messages started trickling in, then flooding. "Gold digger, leave him alone. You are trash. Watch your back." Maya sat in the break room at the grocery depot, reading the messages with trembling hands. She felt sick. This was exactly what Ethan had warned her about. This was the monster he had tried to build a wall against. She deleted the apps from her phone, but the fear lingered. She felt watched. That evening, she finished her shift at the hospital late. It was 11 at night. The parking lot was dark, the streetlights flickering in the wind. Maya walked quickly toward her car, her keys clutched between her knuckles, a trick she had learned living in bad neighborhoods. She heard footsteps behind her. She quickened her pace. The footsteps sped up. "Hey," a voice called out. Rough and slurring, Maya didn't turn. She broke into a jog. "Hey, you are the girl, aren't you? The one from the internet." A hand clamped down on her upper arm. Maya screamed, a short, sharp sound that was swallowed by the empty lot. She was spun around. A man was standing there, wearing a hoodie that obscured his face. He smelled of stale beer and aggression. "You think you can mess with big money?" he sneered, his grip tightening on her arm until she whimpered. "You think you are special?" He wasn't trying to rob her. He was trying to scare her. He shoved a piece of paper into her hand. "You sign this," he hissed. "You sign a statement saying you made it all up. You clear his name, or we come back." He wasn't working for Ethan. He was working for the narrative. He was a fan, or a hired thug for someone who wanted to exploit the chaos, terrified. Maya reacted on instinct. She stomped hard on his instep and twisted her arm with all her strength. The man grunted in surprise, his grip loosening just enough. Maya tore free. She didn't look back. She sprinted between the rows of parked cars, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She ducked behind a large SUV, crouching down on the wet asphalt, gasping for air. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers were shaking so violently she dropped it once, scrambling to pick it up. She couldn't call the police. They would take a report, but they wouldn't stop the internet. They wouldn't stop the hate. She needed the only person who understood the size of the storm she was in. She opened her contacts. She had deleted his number, but she had never deleted the contact card for his work line, the direct private line to his desk that he had given her on that first night of the practice date. She pressed call. It rang once, twice. "Please answer," she sobbed quietly. Please answer, Ethan Cole," a voice said. It was him. He was still at the office at 11 at night. "Ethan?" Maya choked out, her voice barely a whisper. There was a sound of a chair scraping violently against the floor, as if he had stood up so fast he knocked it over. "Maya?" His voice was instant, alert, and filled with a terrifying intensity. "Where are you?" "I am at the hospital parking lot," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "A man. He grabbed me. He said I had to sign something. Stay there," Ethan commanded. The authority in his voice was absolute. "Do not move. Do not hang up. I am coming. I am scared. Ethan," "I know," he said, and she could hear the sound of him running. Doors slamming open in the background. "I am coming, Maya. Keep talking to me. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise." Maya pressed the phone to her ear, curling into a ball on the cold pavement, listening to the sound of his breathing on the other end, the only lifeline she had left in a world that had suddenly turned dark. Ethan Cole stood alone in the center of his office, surrounded by the silent, glowing monitors of his empire. The city of Riverton sprawled beneath him, a grid of amber lights shivering in the relentless rain, but he saw none of it. For the last 2 weeks, he had been a ghost haunting his own life, moving through meetings and decisions with a mechanical precision that masked a hollowness in his chest so deep it felt physical. He had tried to tell himself it was for the best. He had tried to convince himself that letting Maya go was the only way to keep her safe from the wolves that circled his world. But the silence in the room was deafening. It was not the peaceful silence of the nights when they used to talk. It was the suffocating silence of a mistake that could not be undone. Then, his private line rang. It was a sound that usually signaled a crisis in the Asian markets or an urgent legal matter. But tonight, as he stared at the flashing light on the console, a cold dread seized his spine. The number was blocked, but the contact card lighting up was the one he had given to only one person. He snatched the receiver up, his hand trembling slightly. "Ethan Cole. Ethan." The voice was a whisper, broken and terrified, and the sound of it shattered his composure instantly. His body went cold, the blood draining from his face as the tremor in her voice registered. "Maya?" he demanded, knocking his expensive chair backward as he stood up. "Where are you?" "Are at the hospital parking lot," she sobbed, the words jagged. "A man. He grabbed me. He said I had to sign something." Ethan was already moving. He did not grab his jacket. He did not shut down his computer. He sprinted toward the door, slamming his hand against the wall panel to alert his security detail. "Stay there," he ordered, his voice dropping to a low, urgent timbre that brooked no argument. "Do not move. Do not hang up." "I am coming. I am scared, Ethan." The confession tore through him like a blade. "I know," he said, bursting out of his office and startling the night janitor in the hallway. "I am coming, Maya. Keep talking to me. I am not going to let anything happen to you. I promise." He reached the elevator. His security chief, a massive man named Graves, already stepping out to intercept him. "Hospital," Ethan barked, not breaking stride. "South lot, now." Graves did not ask questions. He spoke into his radio, and by the time they reached the ground floor, the SUV was waiting at the curb, engine roaring. Ethan dove into the back seat, the phone still pressed tight against his ear. "Talk to me, Maya," he said, his breathing heavy. "Tell me what you see." "I am behind a blue van," she whispered. "It is raining. I can't see him anymore, but I think he is still there. He's not going to touch you." Ethan swore, his eyes fixed on the blurring streetlights as the driver ran a red light. the siren wailing. "I am 5 minutes away. 4 minutes. Just breathe for me. Can you do that? I am trying." "Listen to my voice," he commanded gently, though his own heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Focus on my voice. You are going to be fine. I am almost there." The drive was a blur of wet pavement and adrenaline. When the SUV screeched into the hospital parking lot, scattering gravel, Ethan did not wait for the vehicle to come to a full stop. He threw the door open and hit the ground running. His security team fanned out instantly, flashlights cutting through the gloom. But Ethan had eyes for only one thing. He scanned the rows of cars, the rain soaking his dress shirt in seconds. "Maya!" he roared. A small figure detached itself from the shadows of a parked van. She was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself, her hair plastered to her face. Ethan felt his chest tighten so painfully he almost stumbled. He crossed the distance in quick, devouring strides. He ignored Graves, who was shouting orders to secure the perimeter. He ignored the flashing lights of the police cruiser pulling in at the entrance. He reached her and didn't stop. He pulled off his coat as he moved, and in one fluid motion, he wrapped it around her shoulders and hauled her into his arms. Maya let out a ragged sob and collapsed against him. "I have you," he murmured into her wet hair, crushing her tight against his chest. "I have you. You are safe." He held her there in the rain, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other spread wide over her back, feeling every hitch of her breathing, every tremor that shook her small frame. He closed his eyes, burying his face in the crook of her neck, breathing in the scent of rain and terror and the overwhelming reality that she was alive. "I am so sorry," he whispered, his voice rough with a guilt that burned his throat. "I am so sorry I was not here sooner. I am sorry I let this happen." "Ethan," she choked out, gripping the front of his shirt. "He knew my name." "Shh," he soothed, rocking her slightly. "It is over. It is over." Graves approached them, his expression grim. "We have a suspect detained near the exit, sir," he reported quietly. "Police are taking over. We need to get you both out of the open." Ethan nodded, his face hardening as he looked at his security chief. But when he looked back down at Maya, his expression was nothing but tenderness. "Let's go home," he said. The ride to the penthouse was silent, but this time, Ethan did not sit on his side of the car. He sat in the middle, his arm wrapped around Maya like an iron band, as if he expected the shadows to reach out and try to take her back. When they entered his apartment, the silence of the high-rise felt different than it had an hour ago. It was no longer a tomb. It was a sanctuary. Ethan led her to the sofa, sitting her down while he went to fetch a towel and a glass of water. He returned and knelt in front of her. He used the towel to gently dry her hair, his movements careful and precise, treating her like fine porcelain that had already been chipped. Maya took the water, her hands still trembling, but the color was returning to her cheeks. She looked around the vast, dimly lit room, then at the floor-to-ceiling windows where the city glowed beneath them. "It looks so peaceful from up here," she whispered. "You would never know what is happening down there." Ethan sat back on his heels, his hands resting on his knees. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes and the set of her jaw. The distance of the past weeks hung between them like a physical wall, built of misunderstandings and fear. "We cannot stay here," Maya said suddenly, turning her gaze to him. Ethan flinched. "I will get you a secure hotel, or a house, anywhere you want to go." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, we cannot stay in this limbo. Ethan, I cannot live like this. I cannot live in fear of your enemies, and I cannot live as a story that other people twist." Her voice was steady, gaining strength with every word, even though her fingers were still trembling at her sides. "I am not a damsel. Ethan, I survived my mother's illness. I survived poverty. I survived tonight. But I cannot survive being half-loved by a man who is ashamed of the mess I bring into his life." Ethan felt the words strike him, finding the cracks in his armor he had tried so hard to seal. He looked down at the floor, the polished marble reflecting his distorted image. "I was never ashamed. he said quietly. Then what was it, she asked. Why did you push me away? Why did you try to manage me? Because I was a coward, he admitted. He looked up, his gray eyes stark and open. I have spent 10 years building this, he said, gesturing vaguely at the room. I control everything, the markets, the board, the media. I thought if I controlled the narrative about us, I could keep you safe. But the truth is, I was terrified of losing control. He stood up and began to pace, the energy too much to contain. I saw what the world does to things that are soft and real. Maya, I thought if I hid you behind a wall of PR strategies, I could keep you, but I was just hiding myself. I was more afraid of the scandal and the chaos than I was of losing the only person who sees me. He stopped pacing and turned to face her. The city lights framed his silhouette, making him look alone and vulnerable. You asked me once if you were just entertainment, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You were never entertainment. You were the only thing that felt true, and I almost threw it away because I was too scared to fight for it the right way. Maya watched him, her heart aching. She stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders. So what happens now, she asked. Ethan stepped closer. He didn't stop at a polite distance. He moved into her space, stopping only when he was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his damp shirt. He reached out and took her hand. He didn't just hold it. He pressed her palm flat against the center of his chest, right over his heart. Maya could feel it beating, rapid, heavy, and undeniably real. I love you, he said. The words hung in the quiet air, absolute and terrifying. I love you. Maya Lewis, that wrong number was the best mistake of my life. I would give up every deal, every title, and every ounce of public approval before I would willingly lose you again. If the world wants to talk, let them talk. If they want to come for us, let them come. But I am done hiding you, and I am done hiding from you. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She searched his face, looking for the strategy, the angle, the lie. But there was none. There was only raw, unpolished truth. She let out a shaky breath, the last of her resistance crumbling. I love you too, she whispered. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, a look of profound relief washing over his features. But, she added, her voice firming, I do not want a savior, Ethan, and I do not want to be kept in a tower. Ethan opened his eyes. What do you want? I want a partner, she said. I want to face the world with you, not hidden behind you. If we are going to do this, we do it together, no secrets, no management, just us. Ethan looked at her, fierce and small and stronger than anyone he had ever met. He nodded slowly. Done, he said. No negotiation. He didn't wait then. He reached up and cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones, wiping away the tear that had escaped. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss like the one at the gala. It was slow. It was reverent. It was careful, as if he were relearning the shape of her mouth, the taste of her breath. It was a kiss of reconciliation, a silent vow stamped against her lips. Maya stepped in close. She slid her hands up his chest, over the damp cotton of his shirt, feeling the solid strength of the muscle beneath. She moved her hands to his shoulders, gripping him, anchoring herself to him. The kiss deepened, the weeks of distance, of silence, of fear, it all melted away, replaced by a heat that started in her chest and spread to her fingertips. Their bodies aligned as they stood there, the city lights framing them like a halo. Ethan's hands settled at her waist, his thumbs brushing slow, possessive circles through the fabric of her shirt. Maya looped her arms around his neck, pulling him down, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. Their breathing mingled, ragged and shallow. The kisses grew longer, more intense, hungry for the time they had lost. But even in the heat of it, there was a mindfulness. Ethan held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, his touch full of emotion more than urgency. Eventually, the intensity softened. They broke the kiss but didn't pull away. They rested their foreheads together, eyes closed, breathing the same air. We are going to be okay, Ethan whispered against her skin. I know, Maya replied, a smile touching her lips through the tears. 3 days later, the flashing cameras of the Riverton Press Club were blinding. Ethan stood at the podium, a forest of microphones in front of him. He looked impeccable in a charcoal suit, the very image of the billionaire CEO. But this time, he wasn't alone. Maya stood beside him. She wasn't hiding in the background. She was wearing a blazer and jeans, looking exactly like herself. Ethan looked out at the reporters, his expression cool and challenging. "I will only say this once." He spoke into the microphones, his voice echoing through the hall. "The rumors regarding Miss Lewis are false. She's not a blackmail artist. She's not a scandal. She's the woman I love, and she has more integrity in her little finger than most of this city has in its entirety. Any further harassment of her or her family will be met with the full legal force of Colton Capital." He looked down at Maya. He didn't check with a PR rep. He didn't look at notes. He just smiled at her, a private, intimate smile that the cameras caught and broadcast to the world. He reached out his hand. Maya took it, lacing her fingers through his. "We are done here," Ethan said to the press. They walked off the stage together, hand in hand, ignoring the shouted questions, walking toward the exit and the rest of their lives. 6 months later. The apartment was small, but it wasn't the damp, drafty place Maya had lived in before. It was a cozy, sun-drenched loft in a quiet neighborhood. The smell of baking bread filled the air, Maya's first experiment for the bakery she was planning to open in the spring. It was late. Rain tapped gently against the window pane, a familiar Riverton lullaby. Maya was in the kitchen, wiping flour off the counter. On the coffee table in the living room, her old phone sat charging. It was battered and cracked, a relic of a harder time, but she refused to throw it away. Suddenly, it buzzed. Maya looked up, wiping her hands on a towel. She smiled. She walked over to the table and picked it up. "Hello?" she answered, leaning her hip against the sofa. "Is this the concierge?" a deep voice asked. Maya looked across the room. Ethan was lying on the couch, his feet propped up, a book resting on his chest. He was holding his cell phone to his ear, his gray eyes dancing with amusement as he watched her. "I am afraid the concierge is off duty," Maya said, fighting a grin. "But I can offer you a very tired baker." "I will take her," Ethan said softly into the phone. "I hear she has a dangerous laugh." Maya hung up the phone and tossed it onto the cushion. She crossed the small space between them. Ethan dropped his phone and opened his arms, catching her as she curled into him. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her head down to rest on his chest. Maya closed her eyes, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. It was the best sound in the world. The wrong number had led them through fear, across class lines, and through the fire of public scrutiny. But here, in the quiet of their home, it was just a memory, a private symbol of the chaotic, beautiful luck that had brought them together. "I love you," she whispered into his shirt. "I know," he answered, kissing the top of her head. "Now get some sleep. We have a lot of bread to bake tomorrow." Maya smiled, drifting off to sleep in the arms of the billionaire who had finally found his way home. Thank you so much for listening to the story She Answered the Wrong Number and an Irresistible Billionaire Started Calling Her Every Night. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Maya and Ethan. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more emotional and exciting tales. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments. Thank you for your support.